The prophetic critique here, or maybe we could say the prophetic warning, has to do with the promise that technology makes to connect us and the reality that so often what it actually does is disconnect us, pull us apart. Not only from others, but even from ourselves. It can isolate us or numb us from our own human experience, our own loneliness. It is not good for people to be alone. This is the first non-good in the entire biblical stories. This is in the creation story. It's not good. And just to be clear, the person in the story, in this creation story, already has God, right? Is already connected to God and is still lonely. God is not enough, and apparently, God is not the solution to the loneliness problem, if I'm understanding the story correctly. And so the prophetic rebuke might be just because you've got lots of followers and lots of likes and lots of tweets and text messages, this doesn't mean that you're not alone. Similarly, if you have God and you have religion, you have spirituality, and you think you've got meaning and you're still lonely, it's okay. It's okay. That's actually in the story. And since this primordial realization, we'll call it, people have been grasping for tools, grasping for relationships to address this loneliness. Very often, instead, masking the reality of our loneliness, but it's still there. And it's still not good. It's still a problem. In her book, A History of God, Karen Armstrong concludes, human beings cannot endure the emptiness and desolation. They will fill the vacuum by creating a new focus of meaning. Right? And on the eighth day, God created video games. So this should sound familiar, right? This is what Louis C.K. is talking about, that sad feeling, I feel alone. And then we reach for the phone, right? And that's sort of where we go. And this makes sense that we would try to escape this. We don't want to face this. We don't want to feel it. We want to transcend these painful feelings, these realities, these emotions. We want to get away. We want to get, very often, up and out of whatever that bad is that we're feeling. And especially when these painful and messy realities are associated with life in this physical world, and we think that maybe there's another better spiritual, utopian, enlightened experience somewhere else, up and out. We want to get high. We want to get away from the ground. We want to get away from the earth. We want to very often get away from our humanity. We talked about this a few weeks ago, the heresy of Gnostic dualism. This is addressed over and over in the New Testament. In many ways, technology has become a really convenient vehicle of Gnostic dualism. Because anytime you're sad or angry or hungry or lonely or tired or bored or whatever, you're just a home button click away from getting whisked away, up and out into the cloud, into cyberspace somewhere else. And it does set off all that same stuff that's going on in your brain. In his book, Getting High, Kester Brewin traces the pursuit of transcendence. And it's brilliant. He says, first with the cavemen, right, they would watch the embers float up from the fire, and they would assume that they're returning to the source of light, right, the stars or the sun or the moon. And then the greatest transcendent technology in history, religion, from the word religia. This is the Latin for the word ligament. The idea of connective tissue that holds things together, that unites, that binds. It offers a reconnection, which assumes some experience of disconnection. We could say some experience of aloneness or loneliness. So the idea in religion, this technology, is that somehow by belief or practice or experience, obedience, sacrifice, pilgrimage, surrender, fidelity, whatever the religious experience is, a person can transcend the disconnection or the loneliness that's experienced on this mortal coil and experience a divine bliss, freedom and otherworldly warmth and light affixed to the loneliness. Or, because very often, if we're honest, it doesn't work, right? We don't actually experience that. So second best, we can at least guarantee that when we die, we'll get up and out, right? We'll get away eventually. Because where is God? God is in the highest, right? God most high. And we have all of this language that leads us to believe that God is up. And so we want to get up and out. But Kester goes on. He says, then with the advent of balloons and dirigibles and blimps and then flight, people got above the clouds. And they realized God wasn't there. And then in the space race in the 1960s, they got to space and they realized the divine wasn't there either. And they had not unlocked the secret mysteries of meaning in the universe. So rather than out, they turned inward. The psychedelic revolution went in But still, really, the hope was to get up and out, escape, to transcend, to numb, not to feel it. But he says the Beatles learned the hard way that this high was unsustainable, right? Even psychedelic drugs, you end up coming down. By the way, psychedelic means to reveal the soul. To reveal the soul. And this is every technology, right? Not just psychedelic drugs. Whether religion or blimps or planes or rockets or LSD, technology, what it does is draw out our innermost desires, the truth of the soul. And it not only reveals this, but it amplifies it. And so Kessler uses the example of a hammer. He says this tool is an extension of the body. So you hold it in your hand, but the hammer, he says, connects back through your arm to your heart, to the soul, to the seat of desire, and it draws out what's there, but it amplifies it. And so if you want to build something beautiful, you can swing the hammer and you can drive nails and you can construct in ways that you never could with your bare hands, because you can't drive nails with your hands. But if you want to destroy and do violence, it can amplify that desire as well. So his argument is technology, whatever the technology is, it reveals the soul and it amplifies it. And then as the psychedelic 60s closed, we had this rush to digital technology. From religion to flight to space to LSD and these ecstatic spiritualities, it became increasingly clear that these are all ultimately religious enterprises. The search for God, the search for the absolute, reaching to the heavens, uncovering the mysteries, communion with the divine, this sort of utopian return to Eden, that technology would fix all the problems of the world, transcendence. That given enough time and money and technology, we could get up and out and away from the problems, from the loneliness. Technology, damn technology. Kessler says, they were technologies to aid our reconnection with the higher power, but having failed to deliver, rather than questioning this drive to repeatedly theologize our tools, we again elevated the latest high-tech innovation and looked at it to elevate us to divinity. And so he goes on to speak of the technology of religion and the religion of technology, and think about how much sense this makes. How digital media has actually assumed the roles religion has been playing for millennia, assuming the divine and transcendent attributes. And so if we just sort of think through these quickly, it used to be that one of the attributes of the divine was omnipresence, right? The divine can be everywhere, all over. But now we've got FaceTime and Skype and hologram video conferencing and virtual reality GoToMeeting and trans-global flight. And so given enough time and money and technology, we can be anywhere, which means given enough time, we can be everywhere. We can be everywhere. Omniscience, all-knowing, one word, Google, right? And so we can be anywhere and everywhere. We know everything. Omnipotence, right? Being all-powerful. And you can push back on this, that's fine. I'm maybe not necessarily saying this is literally true, but from your phone you can pay bills and turn on the lights and do the AC in your home and start your car and send money to a loved one and buy tickets to fly around the world and affect the stock market and check the surf report and predict the weather and change the outcome of important events. There's one omnificent, which I didn't know about this. This means all creative. And now you can source creativity on the internet, right? Websites like Fiverr and 99 Designs. Anybody Pinterest? Pinterest? Yeah, right. And everyone else who's not raising their hand. You can get things ghost written for. You can crowdsource creativity across the planet in real time from your phone. And so almost like he's saying in the clip, you can have this thought like, oh man, I wish I could think of a name or a logo or some catchy copy for like the thing that I'm doing. And you can find it right now. You just put it out there and creativity comes back. It used to be that God had to send an angel of light to deliver a message to a virgin teen, but now we have texting. You can send an instant message anywhere at any time and deliver messages right now. Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, right? There are all these different vehicles to do the same thing, which is to communicate right now. Everlasting life. This is terrifying. And I had a lot more examples, but I don't want to go into it because it scares the hell out of me. So this is no longer a spiritual question, right? But science, tech, something called biohacking, brain supplements. There are people who are like kind of pseudo-successfully uploading consciousness to machines. Technology has now outpaced religion at its own game, right? Technology is answering all the questions religion has been talking about for millennia, but it's terrifying. So where is life found? How is meaning made? Where do the answers, the mysteries come from? The inception of desire. Experts believe that you are looking down at it between 5 and 6 hours a day. 5 and 6 hours a day, which, by the way, shameless plug, this is why we have the Collective app. Because Collective isn't just an hour and a half on Sunday nights, it's the content and connection being available to you across the globe 5 to 6 hours a day, where you're already living, because you're already on your phone 5 to 6 hours. So 5 to 6 hours a day. Crazy, right? In the 5 to 6 hours, we're not spending praying or chanting or meditating or memorizing sacred scripture or making a pilgrimage or walking a labyrinth or making confession, but we are living the life of the gods on our smartphone. Omnipotent, omnipresent, omnificent, omniscient. Kester said this when I was in Belfast a couple years ago. And think about this, lay this thought over, 5 to 6 hours a day. He says, as we bow down, our kids watch us worship, right? And this is the very end of his talk, and he has his phone in his hand, and he sort of does the thing like this. He says, as we bow down, our kids watch us worship. They see our religion. And I think Louis C.K. is rightly suspect and rightly discontent with just passing on this technology in this way to his kids. But I think if we're going to question whether or not our kids should have it, we might want to swim upstream a little bit and go, what is this doing to us? Right? Not just, oh, my kids shouldn't have it, but I'm fine. It's going to be good. I can control it. So Caitlin mentioned next week is this first intergenerational Sunday sort of that we're going to begin doing once a month. And part of what we're trying to do is innovate a program that engages students with this insane idea that it's okay to be quiet. It's okay to experience their emotions, the fullness of the human experience, to be present in human relationships rather than escaping into technology or whatever any other number of distractions might be. What if our middle schoolers could learn, like we do as a community, like we do every week, to critique the water they're swimming in? To look at themselves and say, is the way I'm living, is the way that I'm treating myself, is the way I'm interacting with people, is this really a good thing? Is this life-giving? To practice this sort of prophetic suspicion, to express a sacred discontent, right? Middle schoolers can do this when they encounter form without substance, when they encounter technology without genuine connection. We think that they can do this and that they need to learn to do this now more than ever because the world they're living in. Because God is no longer understood to be the all-seeing, all-judging eye, right? Instead, it's each other. And the judgment is plastered all over the comment section of your Facebook wall for the world to see, right? It's not God who sees and judges, it's one another, and it's all happening in real time on social media. And I think Louis C.K. hits this perfectly. He says, essentially, the same technology that gives us this immense power, that draws out and amplifies our souls, our innermost thoughts and desires, it actually insulates us from consequences by disconnecting us from one another, right? He says, in connection with this, we can call someone names, distance from the consequences of interpersonal connection, insulated by technological disconnection. So I can call someone names and not feel what it feels like to be with them. And this, I think, is at the heart, right? Here we are back. It was a slow burn, but we're back to Isaiah. Thank you for being patient. At the heart of Isaiah's prophetic warning, I think is this, that in the same way digital media insulates us from that bad feeling of making someone grimace by calling them a name, in Isaiah's day, the technology was religion. And it ended up doing the same kind of insulating. It gave the illusion of connection, but in reality, it allowed the abuse and the oppression of people. It insulated by the promise of religious connection. So in the same way technology can convince us that we're connected, because I've got 1,000 friends and 350 followers and I get tons of likes and we're texting all the time. All the while, we're drifting further and further from actual vulnerable, close, interpersonal relationships in space and time reality. In the same way, religion can convince us that we are connected, that we are who we believe we are. We're righteous, we're religious, we're believers, we're just, we're pure, we're good, we're true, we're connected. All the while, us believing that is the very thing that allows us to live the opposite reality in our lives. And Isaiah says it like this. Feast and fast and prayers can actually disconnect you from God. These things are repulsive to God if you're continuing at the same time to do violence and oppression and exploitation, because the name of God is not the name of an empty religion. It's not the name of pseudo-connection, but the name of that call to justice, to set the oppressed free, to share bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless and poor into your house. So you can see how the technology of religion, with this quest for transcendence, the promise that we can transcend and escape, rather than grounding us in a real and whole form of life, it can actually disconnect us from the most sacred form of life in this world. In the name of connection, it disconnects us. Or we might say in the name religio, right? To be reconnected. We can end up further insulated and isolated from genuine connection. And what is Louis C.K. saying? And what is Pete Holmes saying? Technology can, and remember, religion is one of the most ancient forms of technology, religio. Technology can, in the name of connection, disconnect us from God, from ourselves, from one another, from the earth, and from the reality of the consequences of our lives in the world and in the lives of people around us. It's part of the reason the Eucharist is so important, and part of the reason that we do this every week. Because we're technology, for all of its gifts, and there are many, many gifts, as we've said, communication and global networking and knowledge sharing and progress and advancement, these are amazing. But for all its gifts, it can very quickly and easily disconnect us because it is by nature disembodied. That's what several of you said in the conversation. It pulls us out of ourselves. We can go somewhere else and never leave the house. We can talk to other people and never see other people. It is disembodied. It is information that travels via cloud. It does not require flesh and blood, human interaction. And it's disembodied interaction, what Louis C.K. is saying, that allows the mean kid to call another kid names and not feel the empathic response when pain arrives in the face of a wounded child. The same disembodied interaction allows the religious elite to sing and fast and celebrate and pray, assuming their righteousness before God while turning a blind eye to the suffering and the injustice that they've created and participated in all around them. But the Eucharist reminds us that at the heart of the Christian tradition is God embodied. God embodied. Not the divinity of Christ who died so he can Superman to heaven and bring us with him all into the cloud, but the other way, right? The humanity of God, who is experienced most powerfully in the fullness of the experience of life in the flesh and blood, ecstasy and agony of being human in this world. So each week when we break this bread, and when we share this cup, when we're called to remember, let's remember. Let's listen. Let's heed this prophetic warning so that we not let technology, even the technology of our own religion, as great as it might be, that it not disconnect us from our own world, disconnect us from our own deep experience of life in its fullness, nor disconnect us from the interdependent reality of life in the human neighborhood, that we need each other and that we affect each other. The way our embodied lives affect and impact the embodied lives of every other body. In the Eucharist, we actually see, I think, one of the most profound technological evolutions in history. I kind of thought of it like this. We see this jump, right? At this point in the Christian tradition, we see a shift. And so what we've been told is there's this revelation, there's a communication of the divine life that was at one point thought only to be transcendent and otherworldly, sort of life in the cloud. We see that life radically embodied in the person Jesus, right? So we've got this sort of single megaphone. But then the shifts to revelation and communication, the divine life, embodied not just in the megaphone, right? Not just in this Christ, but embodied in the body of Christ, the church. We might say a worldwide web, a human network of divinely human grace. We see a technology that was limited by the singularity of locality, time, history, essentially a megaphone that could reach anyone in earshot, a fixed point, evolve into a universal technology. But again, the important thing is not a disembodied technology. It remains embodied, and perhaps even more so, because it is a technology of interpersonal connection. It's a call to live as people connected to one another in the fullness of the human experience. That means joy and sadness, and the fullness of interdependence. And finally, the Eucharist turns on its head the quest for transcendence, the quest to get high, the quest to leverage technology to escape, insulate, isolate, or evacuate. All of these ways that we want religion to get us up and out, somewhere else. I think the Eucharist might be one of the most final and profound calls to make life on earth. Immanence, materiality, humanity. The idea, this is a radical idea, that we are the body of Christ. Right here, right now, not elsewhere, not up in a cloud, not up and out somewhere else. But the thing we seek, that for so long we thought was transcendence, the ability to get away, the thing we seek, we actually already are. It's just us. It's us in this room right now. What we're seeking, we already are. Not up and out, but within and all around. So the table of the sacred call to an integrated life, the table that makes the highest and best use of the divine technology of human relationships, has been set for us tonight. As always, it's open to us and to all people, and no one will ever be turned away. When you're ready, feel free to come and grab a piece of bread and dip it in the cup.